So today I wanted to talk about the state of Mistweaver, and this is more of a talking about what might happen in the future, which means a lot of conjecture, but I think it could be a fun video to look back on in a couple of weeks or months and see how right or wrong I was. I'm not going to be talking about how good Mistweaver is versus other healers. Instead, I'm going to be talking about how Mistweaver plays with the two main builds at the moment and what I see as the issues the spec has. And the interesting part here, I think, is some of these issues are flying under the radar at the moment, exactly like they were in beta, and I'm interested to see if in the coming weeks things play out in a very similar manner to how they did during beta. Now in beta we started off with heroic dungeons only, and we had a whole bunch of new talents and mechanics to play around, like Feline Stomp, which meant many of us got quite caught up in the fact that we could pick some new talents, go into heroics and have fun. It wasn't challenging content, everything died in 10 to 15 seconds, and many of the issues I think that Mistweaver is about to face weren't very apparent at the time. I remember making a post on the forums at the time saying that Mistweavers definitely had some mana issues, but those issues were being obfuscated by how strong and how fun Feline Stomp and Fistweaving was, but in any environment where we couldn't Fistweave, we were going to really struggle. And at the time, that post copped a little bit of flack because it was very easy to go into heroics and kill bosses in 15 seconds or 20 seconds or something and never really have to be challenged. It was also very easy to do things like run into a pack of mobs, drop your Feline Stomp, everything dies so quickly that some of the issues regarding the quality of life of Fistweaving and Feline Stomp also weren't apparent. Like mobs moving around, or even mobs having abilities that many of them didn't have back in the heroic days of early beta. So mobs moving out of your Feline Stomp, or your group having to move around a pack of mobs to avoid ground effects and things, which mean you can't stand in your Feline Stomp and things like that, weren't really apparent issues at the time. So it'll be interesting to see if history repeats itself, so to speak. So, out of the two builds I'm talking about, the first is going to be a Fistweaving build, which focuses primarily on taking the Feline Stomp branch and using ancient teachings to heal your party by doing damage. Now, the strength of Fistweaver is that it doesn't spend much mana to do its healing. The main mana cost with a Fistweaving build is dropping your Feline Stomp, and if you're not repositioning that very often, it's extremely efficient to do your Tiger's Palm into Blackout Kick spam rotation to get quite a lot of healing and quite a lot of damage out. That is the second strength, is that a Fistweaving build usually does decent damage. I think the unfortunate part about this is that Fistweaving damage itself hasn't changed much throughout beta, but other healers have had quite significant damage buffs, to the point where this week doing all my Mythic Zeros on my 5 of 7 characters, or sorry, 4 of 7 healers that I've currently got leveled up, my Resto Shaman and my Disc Priest do more damage than my Fistweaving Mistweaver, which is a little unfortunate. The weakness of a Fistweaving build comes down mostly to its quality of life. Feline Stomp being a long, thin line and having a lot of mobs that move around and charge, and a lot of ground AoE effects to avoid, and a lot of bosses with movement mechanics and things like that, means that your ability to always be standing in your Feline Stomp to get your Fistweaving, Tiger's Palm Cleave buffs and things like that can be quite difficult. The second weakness is that you're in melee. This doesn't seem like much of an issue at the moment, and that's because Thundering isn't in yet, we haven't got Mythic Plus affixes, we haven't started pushing keys and really seeing how punishing some mechanics can be for melee. But once we start seeing Quaking and Storming and Thundering and melee heavy groups, the prospect of bringing another healer that also is in melee is not going to be particularly attractive to a lot of groups, I don't think. The third issue Fistweaving has is the smart heal nature of Ancient Teachings. It is a smart heal in the sense that it will always target an injured ally, but sometimes it might heal the guy on 90% health and not the guy on 10% health. So that RNG factor was another thing that was hidden away as an issue that wasn't very apparent in early beta. Because Fistweaving in the beginning did so much healing. It had so much excess throughput that anytime you pressed Tiger's Palm into Blackout Kick, you got 9 instances of Ancient Teachings healing. And any of those single instances would almost top anyone who took incidental damage, especially in a heroic environment. So the fact that it wasn't a truly smart heal wasn't an issue. But as we head into Mythic Plus next week, I think it's going to become more apparent, especially since the Rising Sun Kick buff. Even in this Brackenhide Hollow Mythic 0, there are quite a few times where one person in the party was very low and I would crit a big Rising Sun Kick, which should be a 50-60k heal, and instead of it going on the person who's low health, it goes on the guy who's at 99.8% health. As far as the throughput goes, on AoE packs or in environments where you can cleave multiple mobs, Fistweaving throughput is quite good. I wouldn't say it's particularly strong. It isn't over budgeted for AoE situations. It's roughly on par with what other healers do in their normal rotational healing. However, when you're hitting a single target only, it is anemic, to say the least. Unfortunately, there will be quite a few boss encounters that will require Mistweavers who have picked a full Fistweaving talent build to be standing at range casting their heals. I'm interested to see if this becomes an issue in the coming weeks. I'm interested to see if people really start discussing the quality of life issues Mistweaver has with Phalanx Stomp, its cooldown, its thin line, even things like Ancient Teachings being a 30-yard range when all the rest of its healing toolkit is 40. I'm also quite interested to see how many Mistweavers start off with a Fistweaving build in Mythic Plus and maybe transition over to a caster-centric build. Now, the caster build I'm talking about is a Tear of Morning Enveloping Mist build. This is a build that takes Clouded Focus, Tear of Morning, Yulon instead of Shiji, takes Mist Wrap, avoids all of the Phalanx Stomp nodes, goes down to take Invoker's Delight, and maybe even Unison. This is a build I've been playing for quite a few of my Mythic Zeros this week, and I've found that its throughput is excellent. Its quality of life is also really quite good. There isn't much to do other than just soothing mist targets and press an enveloping mist into them. The core interaction of this build is Tear of Morning and Rapid Diffusion. So the idea is that every time you cast an enveloping mist, Rapid Diffusion creates a renewing mist for 6 seconds, and Tear of Morning will cleave 20% of your enveloping mist healing onto all of your renewing mist targets. You can then leverage life cycles, Clouded Focus, and Yulon to try and ameliorate any mana issues you might have by pressing a lot of enveloping mists. Like I said, you can also take Unison with this, and because you can spend quite a lot of time channeling Soothing Mist for your enveloping mists casts with Clouded Focus, you can get a substantial amount of healing out from just your Soothing Mist and Unison, Jade Serpent Statue and things like that. The strength of this build is that its throughput is extremely high. Your Unison Soothing Mist and your Tear of Morning Cleave healing means that even though you're casting Soothing Mist on a single target and pressing Enveloping Mist, you end up healing the rest of your party quite effectively. As far as the caster build weaknesses go, unfortunately it does almost 0 damage. This is mainly because you're again casting Soothing Mist and Enveloping Mist quite often, and the things that you could use to improve your damage, like Zen Pulse, at the moment don't work with mouse over macros, which makes this quite hard to play around and see the damage that could be possible. But even if Zen Pulse is working properly, it's not going to do anywhere near the kind of damage that a Fistweaving build would do, and a Fistweaving build already doesn't do exceptional damage. So a casting Mistweaver build is effectively a ZDPS build. It has the advantage of playing at range, but the disadvantage of very often being locked in place because you're turret healing. There is a potential third build. I've been told on the forums that apparently a very mastery heavy build is possible and could be quite good. At the moment, I don't have the gear to test this, but it's something I'll be doing in the future. Personally, I don't see how a heavy mastery build could really do that well. I've tried it in the past in BFA and Shadowlands, and regardless of how much mastery you end up having, like, you could have so much mastery that you would instantly top any target you hit with Gust of Mists. and it would still be a questionable build because you're only ever healing one target at a time. It's still something I'll be checking out in the future. Overall for Mistweaver, something I would really like to see is the AoE on Feline Stomp be changed, or the cooldown removed or significantly lowered. As far as the caster build goes, I think at the moment all it really needs is damage. I think it could have mana issues, but I also think that if you play around Yulon effectively and you leverage your life cycles and your clouded focus mana reduction as much as possible, I could see the Tear of Morning build being very strong if it had damage. Reducing the cooldown on Zen Pulse, or making it easier to use, or just giving it significantly more damage could all be good options. Mostly I'm just interested to see how the Mistweaver meta is going to evolve over the next couple of weeks, and if the mana issues, the quality of life issues and things that showed up in beta once Mythic Plus opened up could possibly be about to repeat itself next week. All of this being said, Mistweaver is still quite a good spec. There are many exceptional players who make this spec perform way better than I make it sound like it could. Thanks for watching, and algorithm stuff.